when the Turner family moved into room 37 in an old apartment building in Manchester, England. They had no idea they were about to step into their most vivid nightmare. The third floor was silent, and the surrounding residents whispered warnings. Never go into room 307. The rent was cheap. But in exchange came a series of strange, unexplainable phenomena. Invisible footsteps, hovering shadows, hoarse laughter echoing from empty hallways. The room seemed alive, angry, and lonely, ready to engulf anyone daring enough to face it. Follow the Turner family as they endure each terrifying night, uncovering the mystery and haunting power of room 37, a place where fear never ends. The Turners had just moved to Manchester, England, into an old apartment building that was conveniently located. They were offered room 307 at an unexpectedly low price. When David signed the lease, he heard multiple warnings from the receptionist. Room 307, no one dares stay on that floor for long. Strange things happen all the time. Are you sure about this? David just smiled. Old stories. We just need a temporary place. The cheap price is enough. Emma looked round, sensing the hallway on the third floor felt colder than the others. The neighboring rooms were all quietly closed. Their footsteps echoed loudly on the old wooden floor. The whole corridor was empty. Not a single person in sight. Oliver and Sophie, the children, walked ahead, their eyes curious but cautious. Sophie whispered, "It's so cold. I don't like this room." Oliver shrugged. "It's just a feeling. I'm sure there's nothing here." When they opened the door to room 307, a strong smell of mildew hit them. Light from the window filtered through the old curtains, casting gloomy shadows across the floor. The room was empty, yet it felt as if someone was watching them from the dark corner. David began unpacking, trying to create a friendly atmosphere. Emma arranged their belongings while Oliver and Sophie explored. But as Sophie touched the wall, in the corner, she shivered and stepped back. "Someone is standing there. I saw a dark shadow moving." David turned on the lights and looked closely, but saw nothing. Still, a cold gust of wind blew through, lifting the curtains and brushing Oliver's face. Sophie clutched her mother, voice trembling. "I don't like this room. It's really strange." That evening, after dinner and getting ready for bed, strange sounds began to emerge. Light footsteps echoed in the hallway, soft but persistent knocks on the door. Oliver listened carefully and heard faint whispers. "Leave, leave." Sophie whispered in her mother's ear, "There's someone here." Emma hugged her children, a chill of fear creeping through her body. David looked around the room, heart racing. They realized the third floor was unlike any place they had ever lived. The other rooms were locked and silent, but room 307 seemed to radiate a cold, oppressive energy, ready to overwhelm them from the very first moment. As night fell completely, the hallway lights flickered, and the unidentified noises continued. Relentlessly, Oliver and Sophie couldn't sleep, their eyes wide, fixed on the dark corners. Emma held her children tightly, while David stood in the center of the room, knowing this would be their first night trapped in an unprecedented haunting. The first night in room 307 was far from peaceful. Just as the Turner family closed their eyes, the strange sounds began. Oliver and Sophie woke to light footsteps on the wooden floor outside the hallway, steady but impossible to pinpoint. Sophie whispered to her mother, "Mum, I hear someone walking out there." Emma sat up, a freezing sensation spreading through her body. "It's probably just the wind, or the floor creaking." But when she looked down the hallway, long, distorted shadows twisted across the walls, making her heart tighten. Suddenly, a soft knock echoed on the door. Oliver jumped. "Someone's knocking." David got up and walked to the door, opening it, but the hallway was empty. Only the flickering light from the corridor and a cold draft remained. A hoarse laugh echoed from a corner of the room. Emma clutched her children, paralyzed with fear. Oliver and Sophie trembled, eyes glued to the darkness, as if someone were watching them. Small objects in the room began to shake. Books fell from shelves. A chair slowly turned toward the dark corner. The door rattled violently, as if someone were pushing from outside. David took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "We have to remain calm. This is just strange phenomena, not anything dangerous." Yet the pressure in the room made his heart pound. Pictures on the walls quivered, lights flickered, casting warped shadows across the ceiling. Oliver saw a shadowy figure hovering in the corner, featureless. No eyes, no mouth, just a dense black shape. He screamed, "Mom, someone's here." Sophie clutched her mother, crying uncontrollably. Emma ran over, but as she approached the corner, the shadow vanished as if it had melted into the air. The footsteps continued outside the hallway. Strange sounds crept throughout the room. Whispers, unclear. "Leave, don't stay." Oliver shivered, afraid to close his eyes. Sophie whispered, "I don't want to sleep anymore." David pulled the family onto the bed, trying to reassure them. "We'll be fine, it's just. This room is strange, but we have to stay calm." Yet inside, fear was already creeping in. They realized the third floor was unlike anywhere they had ever lived. The pressure from room 307 grew stronger, threatening to crush all sense of calm. As the long night dragged on, the noises didn't diminish. The whispers became clearer, as if someone was standing right by the head of the bed, watching them. The Turner family couldn't sleep, eyes wide in the darkness, realizing that room 307 was beginning to reveal its true haunting power. The next morning, weak sunlight filtering through the window could not dispel the chilling atmosphere. Oliver looked around the room, voice trembling. I don't like this room." Sophie nodded, hugging her mother. "Me neither." Emma and David knew this was only the beginning, and what room 307 was capable of would become far more intense in the nights to come. On the second night in room 307, the atmosphere grew heavier than ever. As darkness fell, the hallway lights flickered, casting strange patterns of light and shadow across the wooden floor. The third floor remained utterly silent, broken only by the echoing footsteps of the Turner family. Oliver and Sophie dared not leave their beds. Every knock, every creak from the hallway made their hearts leap. A long, drawn-out sigh emerged from a dark corner near the window. Sophie clutched her mother. "Someone's out there. I can feel it." A cold gust of wind blew in from the window, tossing the curtains and brushing Oliver's face. A chair on the desk spun on its own, crashing into the wall with a deafening thud. David hurriedly stood up, checking around, but the hallway was empty, only the deep, consuming darkness seeming to swallow them whole. The sounds intensified, whispers threading through the room, sometimes echoing from the ceiling, sometimes from the corners. Oliver saw a dark shape appear near the door, warped in form, hovering and slowly moving closer. No eyes, no mouth, just a dense black silhouette, yet the pressure it carried made the entire room feel frozen. Sophie cried out. "He picked us to leave." Oliver hugged his sister, trembling. "I don't want to. I'm scared." Emma gripped her children's hands tightly, eyes red, heart pounding. David stood in the middle of the room, trying to remain calm. "We just need to stay calm. Just observe." The knocking grew violent, the door rattling as if someone were hammering against it. Objects in the room moved on their own. Books fell to the floor, a painting tilted, the ceiling shook lightly, and a small crack oozed a red liquid. The pressure from the shadow intensified, threatening to crush the family to the floor. Oliver glanced into the mirror at the head of the bed, and saw himself being pulled toward the ceiling by the dark shape, his eyes wide with terror. Sophie sobbed uncontrollably. "I don't want to stay here anymore." Emma held her children close, trying to remain composed, but despair seeped through every fiber of her body. The air thickened, punctuated by long sighs and hoarse laughter from multiple directions. David tried to reassure them. "We will survive. Just be patient." But at that moment, the shadow surged closer, its intense pressure forcing the family to collapse to the floor. Throughout the night, the hauntings continued relentlessly. The noises, the darkness, and the oppressive force of room 307 made it impossible for the Turner family to sleep. Oliver and Sophie kept their eyes fixed on every corner. Emma held her children, and David stood guard, aware that the third floor was demonstrating its true haunting power. When the weak morning light crept through the windows, it could not dispel the cold and oppressive atmosphere. The Turner family stood in the room, trembling and exhausted. They realized the third floor was not just empty space, it was a living, angry, and merciless entity. Room 37 would reveal even more terrifying manifestations in the nights to come. On the third night in room 37, the air felt so heavy it seemed almost cuttable with a knife. Darkness engulfed the floor. The third level was unusually still, the only sound the faint whistle of wind through the corridor. Then, suddenly, strange noises erupted, coming from multiple directions at once. Oliver and Sophie sat on the bed, eyes wide, trembling. Strange footsteps echoed in the hallway, pacing back and forth, Then abruptly stopping, a hoarse sigh came from a corner of the room, followed by a savage, chilling laugh, making Emma clutch her children tightly. The door rattled violently, opening and closing on its own. Small objects moved freely. Books fell. A glass tipped over. Curtains flew in. The cold wind, the pressure from the shadow grew more intense, making the floor tremble as if the room itself was breathing rapidly. Oliver saw the dark figure appear near the window, warped and floating. It advanced, the force making it hard for him to breathe. Sophie screamed, her voice shaking. He's here. Emma held her children close, eyes red, heart racing. David stood in the room, trying to remain calm, but his hands shook under the invisible pressure. The noises came relentlessly, whispers, knocks, hoarse laughter echoing from the ceiling, the floor, and the dark corners. The ceiling shook violently, a small crack oozing red liquid. The chair spun violently, crashing against the wall. The shadow surged closer, the flickering light casting grotesque shapes across the room. Oliver saw himself in the mirror, being pulled toward the ceiling by the shadow, eyes wide with terror. Sophie cried, voice trembling, "I don't want to stay here anymore." Emma held her children, trying to stay composed, but despair coursed through her. David approached the door, looking down the hallway, but saw nothing but deep darkness. The third floor was silent, yet the room's oppressive force remained relentless, as if trying to crush them. Sighs, laughter, and moving shadows prevented the Turners from resting, leaving them only able to huddle in fear. As the night dragged on, the flickering hallway light only intensified the haunting feeling. The Turner family realized the haunting had escalated. The room was no longer just darkness. It was a living, angry entity, overwhelming every trace of calm. When dawn finally broke, the room's oppressive force lingered, and the light could not dispel the chill. Exhausted and trembling, the Turner family understood this was only the beginning. Room 37 would unleash even more violent horrors in the nights to come. The next morning, the Turners were still shaking from the sleepless night. Oliver and Sophie sat on the bed, eyes wide, watching every subtle movement. David took a deep breath, looking at Emma, voice grave. "We need to know what's happening here." Emma nodded, gripping the children's hands. They decided to go down to the first floor to investigate the room's history. In the lobby, they met an elderly woman who had lived in the building for decades. Her name was Margaret. She looked at them sternly, eyes full of fear and experience. "Room 37, Margaret said, voice trembling. "No one dares stay there long. People hear crying, savage laughter, and shadows lurking for years." Oliver asked curiously, "Did someone die there?" Margaret nodded, her face pale. "A man who lived alone. Henry Caldwell. He disappeared mysteriously. People believed he died in that room, but no one knows why. After that, the room became haunted. Anyone who rented it soon left." Emma asked, trembling, "His spirit is still here?" Margaret glanced around, whispering, "Yes, he's not just lonely. He's angry because he was forgotten, avoided by everyone. And what your children see is only the beginning." When the Turner family returned to room 307, the air was still cold and heavy. The shadow appeared more frequently, its warped form hovering around the room. The dark corners seemed to want to swallow them. Oliver whispered to his sister, "I can feel him sad and angry." Sophie shivered. "I hear him calling at night. He wants us to play with him." David observed every corner, hands trembling. The ceiling shook lightly, a streak of red liquid dripping near Oliver's feet. Emma held her children, tears welling, despair spreading. Whispers from the hallway echoed constantly. "Stay with me. Do not leave. Stay." The voice wormed into every thought, every vein, nearly breaking the Turner family. Oliver stared at the shadow near the window. "I think he wants us to understand his loneliness," Sophie cried, hugging her mother. "I don't want to play anymore." David took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "We need to uncover the past, understand what happened in this room. Only then will we have a chance to survive." The shadow seemed to recognize their resolve. It moved closer, the pressure increasing, lights flickering. Objects rolled, books fell from shelves, the door slammed shut. The air was thick, as if trying to drown them in fear and despair. The Turner family realized room 307 was not just storing Henry Caldwell's memory. It embodied loneliness, anger, and despair. If they did not understand the room's secret, they would remain trapped in the darkness of the third floor forever. As they stood silently, the shadow hovered in the corner, watching with invisible eyes, waiting for their next move. Room 307 retained its haunting and merciless power. On the fourth night in room 37, the atmosphere grew heavier than ever. The flickering ceiling light could not banish the shadows, turning every corner of the room into something warped and terrifying. The strange noises that had begun before had now escalated into a relentless storm, chaotic, overwhelming, and inescapable. Oliver and Sophie clung to each other on the bed, trembling. The door rattled continuously, shaking violently as if someone were pounding on it. A chair flew off the desk, crashing into the wall with a deafening impact, sending shockwaves through the room. Emma held her children, eyes red, heart pounding. David stood in the middle of the room, hands shaking, trying to stay calm. Yet the room's oppressive force nearly made him collapse. The dark shape appeared clearly, hovering in the middle of the room. Its warped, dense black form exuded a pressure so intense that the air itself felt thick, and their hearts threatened to burst. It moved closer, each step pressing them toward a corner. Whispers, sighs, and hoarse laughter echoed simultaneously. From all directions, the ceiling shook violently. A crack oozed red liquid, dripping near Oliver's feet. The floor felt icy, as if trying to sink the family into despair. Oliver screamed, voice trembling, "Mom, he's coming." Sophie sobbed uncontrollably, clutching her mother. "I'm scared. I don't want to stay here." Emma held her children tightly, trying to stay composed, but her hands shook violently, and her voice caught in her throat. David scanned the room, attempting to locate the dark figure. It moved faster now, the pressure intensifying, as if the entire room were about to collapse. Objects flew chaotically, books tumbled, cabinet doors slammed open and shut, curtains whipped. In the cold wind, the cacophony threatened to disorient them completely. The dark shape surged closer, the extreme pressure forcing everyone against the walls. Oliver saw his reflection and his sisters in the mirror being pulled toward the ceiling, eyes wide with sheer terror. Sophie cried out, trembling, "I don't want to. I don't want to." The air grew thick, the pressure from the shadow making it nearly impossible to breathe. David tried to steady himself. "We have to survive. Just stay calm." But his words were nearly drowned by the horrific sounds reverberating around them. The night dragged on like an endless nightmare. When dawn broke, the room's pressure eased slightly, but still lingered. The Turner family, exhausted and shaking, realized that room 307 was no ordinary haunted room. It was a living, furious, violent entity, and they had never faced anything this terrifying before. They understood that the nights ahead would be even more horrifying, and the third floor, where room 307 resided, remained a place no one dared enter unless they wanted to confront unimaginable fear. On the fifth night in room 307, the Turner family knew they could no longer avoid it. The dark shape appeared more distinctly than ever, its pressure so dense that the air in the room felt almost solid, and their hearts pounded in unison. Oliver and Sophie trembled on the bed, eyes fixed on the dark corner. The shadow hovered, warped in shape, with no eyes, no mouth, yet its mere presence made everyone feel unbalanced. It advanced, step by silent step, the pressure making each breath a struggle. Emma hugged her children tightly, voice shaking. We have to stay calm." David stood in the middle of the room, hands trembling, eyes locked on the shadow, trying to steady the family. Yet he too felt the utmost terror. The door slammed shut behind them, the impact startling everyone. Objects in the room flew chaotically. Books tumbled, chairs smashed into the walls, curtains flailed in the cold wind, creating unending chaos. A hoarse whisper threaded through the room. "Do not leave. Stay with me," Oliver screamed, voice trembling. "He's watching me." Sophie clutched her mother, sobbing, "I don't want to stay here. I'm scared." The shadows, pressure nearly knocked them to the floor, hearts racing, bodies chilled to the bone. The dark figure surged even closer, the force so strong the floor trembled. The ceiling cracked slightly. A streak of red liquid dripped near Oliver's feet. The air thickened, sighs, laughter, and pounding noises echoing from every direction. David struggled to remain composed. "We have to survive." But the crashing sounds and oppressive force nearly overwhelmed him. Emma held her children, eyes red, trembling in waves, despair consuming the room. The shadow moved directly in front of the bed, the intense pressure making it impossible for the family to breathe. Oliver saw himself and his sister in the mirror, being pulled toward the ceiling, eyes wide with sheer terror. Sophie screamed, "I don't want to. I don't want to." All night, the hauntings continued relentlessly. The shadow moved constantly, its pressure thickening the air, objects flying wildly, sounds echoing throughout the room. The Turner family could not sleep, eyes wide, trembling, realizing this was the ultimate horror of room 37. When dawn finally came, the shadow gradually retreated to a dark corner. The pressure lessened but lingered. Exhausted and shaken, the Turner family understood that room 37 was not merely a haunted room, it was a furious, violent, and merciless entity, and if they wanted to survive, they would have to confront it again in the nights to come. On the sixth night, room 37 was no longer just darkness. The air was thick, icy, and so heavy that every breath felt labored. Oliver and Sophie stood trembling, eyes fixed on the dark corner where the shadow hovered. The pressure it emitted was so intense their hearts raced uncontrollably. The door slammed shut behind them, cold wind rushing in, making the curtains whip violently. A horse laugh echoed, bouncing off every corner, mingling with the relentless invisible footsteps, making the Turner family feel completely surrounded. The dark figure appeared directly in front of Oliver and Sophie, its form warped and solid, black, no eyes, no mouth, yet its presence was enough to make anyone near faint. It advanced slowly, each step pressing down with a force that seemed intent on crushing them individually. Emma clutched her children tightly, voice trembling. We have to stay calm." David stood in the center of the room, hands shaking, struggling to maintain composure, but the immense pressure nearly brought him to his knees. Objects in the room flew chaotically, books tumbled from shelves, chairs spun on their own, cabinet doors slammed open and shut, curtains whipped wildly. The ceiling rattled violently. A streak of red liquid dripped from the ceiling near Oliver's feet. Sighs, laughter, and pounding echoed from every direction, thickening the air and suffocating the space. Oliver screamed, "Mom, he's watching me." Sophie sobbed uncontrollably, voice trembling, "I'm scared. I don't want to stay here." The shadow's pressure was so intense, they nearly collapsed to the floor. The dark figure moved closer to the bed, its extreme force making the space feel like it would collapse entirely. Oliver saw himself and his sister in the mirror being pulled toward the ceiling, eyes wide with sheer terror. Sophie cried out, "I don't want to. I don't want to." Throughout the night, the haunting reached its peak. The shadow moved relentlessly, its pressure shaking the room violently, objects flying, noises echoing everywhere. The Turner family could not sleep, trembling, eyes wide, realizing that room 307 had unleashed the full extent of its terrifying power. When dawn finally broke, the shadow slowly retreated to a dark corner, its pressure easing but still lingering. The Turner family, exhausted and trembling, realized they had survived the final night. The weak light from the window finally cut through some of the chill, but the memory of the horrific night remained etched deeply in their minds. Room 307 fell silent again, but the third floor and the room still retained their ominous atmosphere. The Turner family left the room, eyes red, bodies weary, carrying a deep-seated terror, fully aware that they had faced the most violent manifestation of the shadow in the room survived, but unable to ever forget what they had endured.
Thank you for following.